Skingrad is a city as beautiful and imposing as it is ancient. With its stunning architecture, quality foods and wines, and low crime rate under the rule of Count Janus Castledor, the Gem of Old Colovia, as it is also known as, is quite an attractive place to live in for many. Nonetheless, if we dare to dig deeper, we might uncover some disturbing secrets. Arguably the least sinister of them all, unless you are a vigilant of Stendar, is the fact that Count Castledor is a vampire. But despite his blood-sucking nature, he appears to be quite benevolent and takes good care of the city he rules over, ensuring the safety of his subjects. However, there is a much less civilized than merry vampire, only known to us as the Pale Lady, who uses the passages leading to the castle's dungeons to feed on prisoners, until we put an end to her life, or rather her undead existence. Another dark elven woman expresses some disturbing preferences for intimate endeavors.
By the way, do you happen to know what the fine is here in Cyrodiil for necrophilia? Just asking.
What?
And most of us are also familiar with Glarthir, a paranoid Bosmer who claims he is being followed due to knowing, in his own words, too much. But ultimately we cannot find any concrete evidence of him being watched, unless one comes across an alleged note in the Surely brothers' house, which could be a rare spawn or a misremembered detail from Braan bovitaan, fellow adventurers. And finally, there is a mansion which blends in seamlessly with the rest of the buildings in the city. Many may not have even entered it, for there does not seem to be an apparent reason to do so. But if we do choose to invite ourselves in, for one reason or another, we will be greeted by anything but warm ambience and tasteful interior. I am speaking of Nerastarel's house, one of Cyrodiil's most enduring mysteries. Drem Yol Lok, Zuris Vaalbo, and welcome to my study in my villa Arborwatch in the lovely city of Chorrol. Here today we will turn our attention to Nerastarel's house, which is dilapidated on the inside and infested with undead, with Nerastarel nowhere to be seen. A location with little to no explanation behind its existence and state. Many heroes of Quatch suspect the place and the individual who supposedly owned it fell victim to time constraints, and I agree. Nonetheless, Nerastarel's house is free for us to investigate, and there are several theories that can be built around what we already have at our disposal, as scarce as it is. Firstly, we will try to find out who Nerastarel is, or more appropriately, who this individual was likely supposed to be. Opening a bracket, Nerastarel's gender is ultimately unknown, but I will get behind the majority of the community and refer to him as a male, which is backed up by the final two theories we shall delve into. However, whether this person was supposed to be a man or a woman is unclear, closing the bracket. Then we shall explore the house itself. Its environmental storytelling, especially on the second floor, has some intriguing details for us to study. Afterwards, we will turn our attention to the speculations available for us to break down, and ones crafted by yours truly. Was Nerastarel simply a necromancer who was killed by the undead he summoned himself? Did he get arrested for killing citizens of Skingrad for his magical projects and meet his end in the dungeons? Was Nerastarel replaced by another character who is the first dead drop contract we receive as the silencer of the Dark Brotherhood after the Sanctuary's purification? Or was he meant to be a part of the Mage's Guild and its questline? These are all questions we will offer possible answers to today. Without further ado, let us focus on the pages of my journal where I have documented my research. To begin, we shall try to uncover as much about Nerastarel as we can. Firstly, it is important to mention that there is no such character in the game. The only two times we can come across this name is when we find the house, which is labeled as Nerastarel's, and the location is briefly mentioned by Amusai from the Thieves Guild as he tells us the whereabouts of the book The Lost Histories, which Theranis, who was killed by the Pale Lady, hid behind the property before he was captured by the guards.
Look under the bush near the well behind Nerastarel's house.
Many fellow researchers assume Nerastarel was a high elf going by his name. And indeed, it does sound like it could be Aldmeri in origin. The suffix "el" is quite common in the Somerset Isles, as it is derived from Ori El, the time dragon, the elven aspect of Akatosh and this race of Mer's supposed ancestor. In names, it is often used to depute divine status. In Aldmeri, Stamriel is written as Stamriel, which translates to dawn's beauty. Therefore, the suffix "el" could also stand for beauty. I checked the available and rather incomplete Dalmeri and Bosmeri dictionaries I could find and did not uncover anything resembling the first part of Nerastarel's name, and the same goes for the language of the High Elves. One may assume the star is derived from Tamrielic and thus stands for, well, star. This still supports the speculation that he is a high elf, in spite of the usage of the common tongue, for the Aelids were known for their magical practices directly connected to Finfille, the stars, which are believed to be tears in the veil of Oblivion leading to Aetherius. After the fall of their empire, the Heartland High Elves were integrated in Aldmeri society as well as Bosmeri. As for Nera, it is derived from the Italian nero and means black. This certain language can be affixed to Cyrodiilic, considering the connection of both of these Zulle tongues to Latin, and funnily enough, the same word carries the opposite meaning of light or candle in Hebrew. Therefore, if we mix everything, Nerastarel could translate to black beautiful / divine star or light beautiful / divine star. Quite a fitting name for a mage. But I digress. Some adventurers also state that they find the moniker to sound more dark elven or wood elven, and the claim holds water, especially considering what we just touched on. Nonetheless, there appears to be a consensus that Nerastarel was a Mer, even if it is unknown which elven race he ultimately belonged to. Another conclusion we can draw from what we have at our disposal, given the size of his home, is that he was rather well off. And the final speculation we can offer regarding this individual is that he was a mage, and more specifically, considering the undead in his mansion, a necromancer, as well as an alchemist, but we shall go over this in more detail as we discuss the final theory. In any case, let us now focus on the house itself. As mentioned before, the building is unkempt on the inside and infested with various leveled undead. For me, it was home to 4 wraiths and a zombie. Upon entering, we will be greeted by scattered and shattered boxes and barrels and spider webs. The rooms we explore are either mostly empty, save for the previously mentioned debris, or in a complete disarray. It appears the house has been abandoned for some time. The second floor, which accommodates Nerastarel's bedroom, is in a much better condition than the rest of the mansion. In fact, it could have passed for an inhabited space, if not for the, in my case, 2 wraiths, as well as the spider webs shielding the painting in front of the desk and the corners of the room. The shelves occupied by alchemical equipment and books are organized, and Fasni, fear not, we will speak of their contents in detail at a later time. The wardrobe and the chests contain clothing and random leveled loot respectively. The only odd that may be of some value to us, aside from the outfits in the dresser that is placed within a hidden jewelry box whose lock we will need to pick. Inside, we can find a piece of level jewelry, and there is a 50% chance we might become one more piece of level bijouterie richer, as well as a 10% possibility for us to acquire enchanted jewelry and or a potion. And that is all. We cannot come across a journal or even notes scattered across the place. There is no sign of Nerastarel or a hint of where he might be. I should also note that the undead within the mansion respawn every 24 hours, and going inside the house is still considered trespassing, in spite of its unusual circumstances. Something I and many others find rather intriguing is that nobody seems to be aware of what is within the building. There are no rumors of strange noises coming from Nerastarel's abode, and of course, nobody ever mentions the owner of the house at all. This can be explained by the alleged elf and his house being cut/unfinished content and will be a persistent loose end in every speculation we will look at. Therefore, I will refrain from speaking of it again, in order not to repeat myself unnecessarily. This is all of the established information we have at our disposal. We shall now focus on the theories available for us to explore. Let us begin. Mora now Minda. The first brief speculation is that he was killed by the undead he summoned. This is a perfectly reasonable explanation, considering we cannot find this individual anywhere in Celedaen, and it would not be the first time arcane practices have not proceeded according to plan on Tamriel, nor will it be the last. Many of us remember finding fin copranne arxuskette, the bodies and bloodied bones of apprentices who studied in the College of Winterhold in Caesar, Skyrim, before their deaths. Magic, much like anything one may not have enough knowledge of and skill in, can be dangerous, and the consequences of even a simple spell gone wrong could be dire. Alok Dilon, necromancy can be quite perilous if one cannot establish control over the undead he or she rises, for they could very easily turn against their summoner. This would be the most straightforward explanation concerning the mysterious building and its elusive owner we are currently discussing. And here comes the next speculation, a personal of mine. Nerastarel was arrested for using citizens of Skingrad for his vulhatare, dark practices, and became a victim of the Pale Lady in the castle dungeons. Or he simply resisted arrest and was done in by the guards, especially if his magicka was depleted. But could he have not been labeled a criminal for simply being a necromancer? In actuality, no. During the Third Era, necromancy was technically legal in Cyrodiil. It was banned by Archmage Hannibal Traven within the bounds of the Mage's Guild, but anyone was free to dabble in Alok Dilon outside of it. Therefore, unless Nerastarel was actively killing citizens of Skingrad to practice on and raises his minions, he would technically not have been legible for arrest. If we go further, we could even suggest that, since he was swiftly dealt with, much like most criminals in the Gem of Old Calovia, everyone ceased to discuss the incident after a while, but still refused to go near the house itself. This would explain why nobody ever mentions Nerastarel and his abode. There is nothing else to be said regarding this assumption, so let us move on to the two, in my opinion, most plausible theories, one of which is my own. A fellow adventurer believes that Nerastarel was meant to be the target of the first Dead Drop Dark Brotherhood contract as opposed to Celedaen, an Aldmeri necromancer aiming to become immortal by achieving lichdom. The latter can be found in Leafrot Cave east of Breville and only spawns once the hero of Quach accepts the contract. The adventurer shares that he or she had always felt this particular quest was rather rushed, and expands on his or her speculation by saying that the Dead Drop contract was likely meant to lead us to our target's house first, which we would find infested with undead, and then we would have to follow the trail to Leafrot Cave or another hiding place closer to Skingrad, especially if he left in a hurry. Given the state we find his house in, all who have delved into the mystery behind Nerastarel have reached the conclusion that he was meant to be a necromancer, much like this particular target. Therefore, our theorist concludes that Nerastarel's house was meant to be the first place we would visit to search for our target, and after finding it full of undead, we were meant to uncover a hint, such as a note or a journal, that would eventually lead us to the necromancer's final location. Due to the first part of the quest having been cut, likely due to time limitations, the developers ensured to name the Aldmeri Mage and the mansion differently in order to avoid confusion. This individual offers another evidence to support his or her theory, stating that necromancers who are followers of Mane Marco usually reside amongst society, and gives Mercator, who can be found in Castle Skingrad by the way, and Caminalda as examples. Given how little we know of the place and absent individual we are currently investigating, I believe this adventurer to be onto something. It is clear that Nerastarel was most likely meant to dabble in necromancy, much like Celedaen. And if one or more of the citizens of Skingrad had suffered due to his practices, or were simply opposed to the craft in spite of it being technically legal in Cyrodiil, it is no wonder Nerastarel would have had a bounty on his head. But alas, we can only guess if this was meant to be the case. A quite insightful and logical theory nonetheless. And now, on to the final several branched speculation, a personal one, which could tie into that of our fellow hero of Quatch in a manner of speaking. Nerastarel was meant to be a part of the Mage's Guild, and more specifically, a trainee alchemist of the Skingrad Guildhall, and or he was replaced by the character of Earthor, who is central to the hero of Quatch getting his or her recommendation from the Guildhall in Skingrad. Before we turn our attention to these possibilities, as well as a third one stemming from this speculation, allow me to prove that our alleged elf was involved in the art of mixing potions and poisons. For this purpose, we shall return to the second floor of his mansion, where we will find two alembics, a mortar and pestle, a calcinator, and a retort, all of which are labeled as novice. We will also see the book Fundamentals of Alchemy by Aliandon Matheri on the desk, which is an introductory text perfect for those who are just beginning to dabble in this often overlooked but rewarding arcane art, in the words of the author. Furthermore, on his bookshelf there is the work Manual of Spellcraft, the Mage's Guild's official beginner's guide to magic. All of these tools and the two books we looked at hint at Nerastarel being interested but rather inexperienced in the arcane arts. Now let us visit the Skingrad Mage's Guildhall. If we look around, we will see multiple copies of the two written expressions we found in Nerastarel's place, as well as an abundance of novice alchemy apparatuses. The reason I suspect he was training to become the alchemist of Skingrad's mages is that this is the only guildhall in Cyrodiil with no alchemist. Falanu Lalu, the lover of all things unliving, literally, is the only available potion and poison mixer in the entire city.
I'm the only alchemist in Skingrad. Not much business here, but I can't go back to Morrowind. It's just like anywhere else in the Empire.
As for Nerastarel being a trainee, all of the tools he owns are suitable for those who may only just be beginning to dabble in alchemy or are still not knowledgeable enough about the craft. The concoctions that come out of novice alchemy apparatuses have less powerful and shorter-lived effects than ones mixed with, say, an adept arsenal of equipment. Furthermore, the book Fundamentals of Alchemy is not a text aimed at advanced potion masters, but at beginners. The Manual of Spellcraft is yet another written expression meant for individuals interested in starting their journey of the arcane, not master sorcerers. This is almost intriguing, but how do the undead in his mansion tie into alchemy? They do not. Nonetheless, they could have a connection to him being an inexperienced apprentice and to the Manual of Spellcraft, which indicates Nerastarel was likely interested in more magical practices aside from alchemy. Given that necromancy is banned within the Mages Guild, he would have no choice but to train outside of it and in secret so as not to get expelled. And here come the several branches of this theory. We shall start with the shortest ones and then move on to the lengthier and, in my opinion, more likely expansion on the speculation. The first one is pretty much the same as the theory we opened this entire segment with, but with a little flavor. Nerastarel was an inexperienced apprentice within the guild who became intrigued by the art of necromancy. Due to Hannibal Traven's ban on the dark art, he was forced to practice in secret, lest he was exposed and expelled. Thus, he experimented in his home. Unskilled as he was incapable of establishing control over the undead he raised and fell victim to them. Plausible, if a little boring compared to what follows and does. Nerastarel was either meant to be the head alchemist of Skingrad's guild hall or an apprentice there, secretly loyal to Manimako. Perhaps he was even going to be one of the necromancers who attacked the hero of Quatch during the quest's ulterior motives, as we are sent to retrieve a book from Count Hasseldor. If we accept the novice alchemical tools and the book Fundamentals of Alchemy we find on the second floor of his house as mere environmental storytelling devices supposed to show us he was an alchemist and a mage, as opposed to that he was inexperienced in either craft, we could assume he would have been of a higher rank in the guild. It is possible we were even to be sent to investigate him by a member of the guild who was suspicious of him, only to find his house trashed and full of undead, with a note or a journal telling us where we can find him after the fact. Which is similar to fin drendir doun braan bovitaan, the theory of our fellow adventurer, albeit connected to a different questline. And now the final and, in my opinion, most likely branch of this particular theory. Nerastarel was replaced by Urthor, a Aldmeri apprentice in the Skingrad guild hall, whom we are sent to find after we ask Adrian Beren for a recommendation. Immediately, we are told that he is quite inept in the arcane arts, having had a few accidents in the past. He seems to dabble in conjuration, and as we know, necromancy is a part of this particular school of magic. Here is what the guild head herself says about this wood elf.
He's an interesting fellow.
And Sulinus Facinus.
A nice enough guy, I suppose, but there was that awful scamp incident last year. That's when Adriana told him he needed to practice somewhere else. Somewhere else. Meaning somewhere far away. So he settled down in Bleak Flats Cave, did all his work there, and came back to town twice a week to check in. Hasn't been around lately, though.
As we dive into Bleak Flats Cave, we will uncover our missing Bosmer surrounded by, you guessed it, undead, and more specifically deranged zombies, but more on that later. After we rescue him, he is ever so grateful.
I'm ever so grateful.
And asks us to lead him back to the Skingrad Mages Guild. After he and Adrian have a rather cold reunion...
Adrian! I'm back! I was rescued!
So it would seem. You're unharmed, I presume?
Well, my pride is a little wounded.
Oh, spare me. You're lucky I bothered to send someone after you at all. In the future, would you please be more careful?
Well, yes. I'll just pack up my supplies and be on my way then. Thank you for sending someone to help me.
The guild head assures us she will write our recommendation, and this marks the end of the quest. Afterwards, Urthor splits his time between the living quarters in the guild and the Bleak Flats Cave. And speaking of the cavern, there is a small chance that alchemy apparatuses, ingredients, or gems may spawn in his living space there. Perhaps we were meant to go to his house instead, which in this case scenario would have been Nerastarel's one, and find him cooped up in his bedroom, hiding from the undead roaming about the mansion, or he would have still been found in Bleak Flat's cave after a necromantic ritual had gone wrong at his place. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The zombies we face in Bleak Flat's cave may have not been summoned by Arthur after all. But I believe they were, and there is very solid evidence supporting that. They are not just any zombies, but deranged ones, and this unique type of undead can only be found in this specific cavern during this specific quest. Plus, Arthur is known for having his experiments blowing up in his face, and we are aware that he had an incident involving a scamp. And he must have conjured that lesser Daedra, no? Furthermore, he omits sharing details of what took place inside the cavern with the guild head, since necromancy is officially banned. Thus, I fully believe Arthur was dabbling in necromancy. There could have been an expansion of this quest, or rather, a new mission he would have given the hero of Quatch after we rescue him from his own failed magical project to clear his house so he could finally return home. To further back up this claim, Nerastarel's house is extremely close to the guild hall, which is very convenient for one who is from Skingrad and has the opportunity to have a place of his or her own. Similarly to the theory regarding Celedaen having replaced Nerastarel as a Dark Brotherhood contract, there was no time to connect Arthur to the House of Horrors we are currently investigating, or rather, they could not rename the mansion or the character to suit the other and expand on the quest. Thus, they chose to give the location and the Wood Elf different monikers to avoid confusion. And last but not least, Arthur is a Bosmer, which is one of the most likely races our missing elf was likely meant to belong to, the other being Aldmeri, Celedaen's race. The connections here are far too many to be mere coincidences in my humble opinion, and not to toot my own horn of Jürgen Windcaller, but I do find this theory to have the most legs to stand on. And on that note, our research comes to an end. A necromancer who was killed by the undead he summoned, arrested or killed by the guards, or murdered by the Pale Lady in the dungeons, or a replaced quest character in the Dark Brotherhood or the Mage's Guild questlines respectively, Nerastarel and his mansion are one of Cyrodiil's enduring mysteries. No matter how little we know of the place and its owner, and despite both definitely being cut content, Nerastarel's house is an exciting, if a terrifying find for the inquisitive explorer and/or thief that makes our imaginations soar wildly with possibilities. Whichever of the theories we discussed is closest to the truth is ultimately left to our interpretation. And this brings me to the question: which of these speculations do you find to be the most plausible? Or perhaps you have your own to share. If you do, please do not hesitate to tell me. I always adore exchanging thoughts and knowledge with you, Difadonne. Arkun slat kogan fahin kalos arkin skilan. Thank you all for your presence and support, as always. I look forward to having you in my study again, but until then, Lok Thum. Don't let the dead bite, Difadonne.